We have this beautiful plate. It's my husband, Jason. I'm Barbie. And we have this beautiful plate that he brought from home that we brought to show you. He brought it. And here it is. Oh. Oops. Oh.
I was so excited to show you this plate, but it must have broken on the way here, and now I feel upset. Can we try to fix it?
Well, I didn't break it.
I know you didn't break it, but can you help me fix it anyway?
You mean help you fix it even though I didn't break it? Well, okay, but I need you to understand I'm a good person. I don't just go around breaking plates belonging to people.
Yes, I definitely know you're a good person. I'd like to
Good.
focus on figuring out how to fix this plate because it means a lot to me.
Oh, okay. Thanks for that reassurance. Yeah, okay. So you guys agree we should definitely try to help him fix this plate. It's in a bunch of pieces. It looks like it was really beautiful. Do you have any ideas on how we could fix it? Glue. That's a great idea, Eliana. Yes, glue would be a fantastic idea. Any other ideas? Clay. Yeah, that's also an excellent idea. Anything else? Okay, we could try tape. Probably wouldn't work that well. Could try chewing gum. Kind of. Yeah, the tape would show. Yeah.
I just remembered an idea. It's called kintsugi.
Oh, what's kintsugi?
Kintsugi is the ancient Japanese art of repairing broken pottery. It uses gold to highlight the beauty of the imperfections that remain when a broken item has been repaired.
Oh, wow. I just happen to have this example right here. Look at this. Is this what you're talking about?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So actually, Soren, this is kind of like showing, like you said, like this has been repaired. It's kind of like glue, like you said, but is there any, you said it's used gold, right? Like,
That's right.
Yeah.
The gold is used to show that something that was once broken is whole again and now has a different beauty.
Oh, okay. I can see it. So I think this, even though it shows, I think it looks really nice and a lot better than tape would look. Don't you think? Yeah. Cool. All right. So it seems like the purpose of kintsugi is to repair something without trying to hide that it was once broken. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. And that kind of is what happens when other things break too, right?
What kinds of things?
Oh, like friendships or relationships. Like a few minutes ago when I got really defensive because I thought you were blaming me that this plate had broken. But as Unitarian Universalists, we don't ignore that. We try to rebuild the relationship so that it's better than it was before. Oh, here, do you guys want to actually feel that? You're welcome to.
I agree. The work of healing is all of our jobs, no matter how big or small we are. And when we repair our mistakes with love, remember that our relationships are more beautiful once we have acknowledged hurt, asked for forgiveness, corrected our mistakes, and made a sacred promise to do better in the future.
Yes, that is exactly what I was referring to. Thanks for explaining it so well. Yeah. Okay, and thanks to you guys for coming up here and sharing your ideas. And now I think it is time for you to go to your religious education classes, and we'll sing while you guys leave. Thanks again. Many of you know my 16-year-old son, Sebastian. He joined our family as a foster child at the age of 8, and we adopted him just over 2 years later. His prior life was difficult, and he developed many coping strategies that were helpful at the time, but that aren't conducive to forming trusting, respectful relationships. This, combined with typical teenage surliness and my insecurity as an adoptive parent, have resulted in a relationship that is fraught with triggers. In the face of stubborn arguing, disrespect, and defiance, I have often reacted with blind rage, and this has sometimes been destructive. Obviously, destructive rage in a relationship with my son doesn't feel quite right. Sorry. In fact, it feels overwhelmingly wrong, especially given his history of previous trauma. I have often felt paralyzed by regret and shame. I'd like to share with you some ways in which I've acknowledged it, tried to move on, and how I continue to try to do better. My therapist encouraged me to identify parts of myself, one of which was rage. She led me in visualization, listening, and empathizing with my rage part so that I could care for it rather than letting it control me. It was surprisingly easy to picture my rage as a threatening Rottweiler. I'll call him Rocky, confined to a kennel in an animal shelter, not unlike the one where I work. Initially, I thought that Rocky needed to be condemned as a dangerous dog and euthanized because he was simply too bad to be allowed to exist. Over time, though, I was able to envision a little girl in the kennel with Rocky. Despite his aggression, the little girl was safe because Rocky was vicious to everyone except the little girl in order to protect her. Then I realized that the little girl was me. I now know that Rocky doesn't need to be condemned and killed. I also know that he no longer needs to protect the little girl that was me. As an adult, I can reassure Rocky that he doesn't need to be vicious, and I can train him to just be a regular dog. He doesn't have to be a licking your face, whole body wagging kind of dog. He can be aloof and completely ignore everyone except for me if he wants, but he doesn't need to attack in order to defend me. Now, when I start to feel triggered, angered by defiance, arguing, or disrespect, I'm sometimes able to focus on Rocky and observe that he desperately wants to attack. Rather than dropping the leash and letting him try to destroy whoever is triggering my emotional pain, I remember that I don't want him to get himself into trouble by behaving viciously, and I try to compassionately reassure him that everything is okay. My approach to Rocky is consistent with other sources of wisdom about rage that I've learned from. Years ago, I read a Japanese story about healing the angry self called The Crescent Moon Bear. As with my inner Rottweiler, the characters in this story are intended to be understood as parts of a single person. A man returns from a war in a terrible rage, angrily rejecting all the kindness and care that his wife offers. The wife seeks help from a healer who asks for a single hair from the crescent of a moon bear. Obtaining this hair involves a long and dangerous journey, including gaining the trust of the bear. The woman bravely undertakes the challenge and finally returns with the hair. However, the healer almost immediately destroys the hair by throwing it into the fire. She then tells the woman to go back to her raging husband and apply everything she learned from the journey to her interactions with him. Currently, I'm reading a book titled Anger, Wisdom for Cooling the Flames by Thich Nhat Hanh. It gives similar advice, but using the archetype of a baby instead of a dog. He states, if a mother is working in the kitchen and hears her baby crying, she puts down whatever she is doing and goes to comfort her baby. The first thing she does is pick the baby up and embrace him tenderly. When the mother embraces her baby, her energy penetrates him and soothes him. This is exactly what you have to learn to do when your anger begins to surface. You have to abandon everything that you are doing because your most important task is to go back to yourself and take care of your baby, your anger. Nothing is more urgent than taking good care of your baby, anger. Thank you for allowing me to share both my regrets and the realizations I've made about my anger. Realizations which I hope will continue to help me minimize destructive expressions of rage in the coming year.
When I was 16 years old, I left home. Not in anger, I would say more in anxiety. I had been chosen to be an international exchange scholar at a school in Italy and live with a family that I'd never met. My classmates at this Liceo Classico in Milan were learning their 9th year of Latin and their 5th year of Greek. When I look back at how scary that year was, and regret some parts of it, I'm also mindful that it opened doors that never would have been opened for me. That was 60 years ago. Now I'm working on what will be my 10th book. The working title is Something Left Over, a memoir of ministry. Something left over, not in the sense of just fragments of memory, but one of my early mentors was a Unitarian Universalist African-American educator who said everyone can be a leader, because leadership is nothing more than having something left over after you care for yourself and your own soul, to care for others and for those issues that affect us all. As I look back on the past year, I'm most grateful for 2 anniversary events. The 50th anniversary of my marriage to my dear wife, Gwen, who is a priest in the Episcopal Church, by the way, and the 50th anniversary of my own ordination to the Unitarian Universalist ministry. Like Jason and Barbie, we have in our family an adopted grandchild, Layla. African American, now almost 9. She too was in foster care and has trust issues. And we just spent a wonderful week with her and her brother. They get along sometimes. But family life is always a matter of rebuilding, trusting relationships and gratitude each time we encounter one another. The Boston kids are with their mom flying home as I speak. The week was full of reconnection, recollection, reassessment, and a little regret. The Italian word pentimenti has to do with regrets. And in art, it has to do with the decision to paint over something that didn't feel like it was quite right. Start again. There's a tension between these 2 meanings, I hope you know. And I've been feeling it as I write my memoir. And so I offer this reflection on recollection to you today. In all of our lives, there are things we regret. As my wife's tradition would put it, we have left undone those things we ought to have done, and we have done those things which we ought not to have done. Mind you, pondering the past at the end of a year like this is far more profound and personal than just playing the public pundit and reviewing what the politicians failed to do in the past year. As painful as that is, what they coulda, shoulda, woulda done. The question is, what will you and I do with the one wild and precious life and year that we have before us? The temptation, I think, is to sink into some, the Puritans had an old classic. John Bunyan's book, Pilgrim's Progress, where he speaks of the slough of despond, thinking, I can't do very much. And yet I am reminded of a later Unitarian, Edward Everett Hale, who wrote, I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can. Repairing our inner lives, deepening our spiritual practice, deepening our relational lives. Let there be peace on earth, but let it begin within. That often means sometimes saying, I'm sorry, when anger or brokenness emerges within our relationships. Just recently, the actor Ryan O'Neal, at the end of his life, may he rest in peace. I'm old enough to recall him starring in that 1970 movie Love Story, in which he was forced to mouth the ridiculous sentence, love means never having to say I'm sorry. Ha! Living by those words cost him. His relationship with actress Farrah Fawcett ended when she found him philandering. No, I'm sorry. In real life, love means often having to say, I'm sorry. And do the work of repair. You see, the second meaning of pentimento in Italian, having to do with an artist painting over something, also comes up for me in writing a memoir. I'm not going to tell everything about everybody. Some of it would be mean. But I'm also not going to cover up the vulnerabilities that I myself have felt and the regrets. There are countless examples in art of this. If you go to the Legion of Honor Museum in San Francisco currently, you can see this wonderful exhibit of Botticelli, one of the first Renaissance painters to work from what Italians call un disegno, an underlying design. But often in his painting, he painted over what he first started with and changed the design just ever so slightly, or sometimes quite a bit. In modern art, perhaps the most famous example is The Old Guitarist by Picasso. It began horizontally, as you see it on your order of service. It was originally the painting of a nude woman covering herself with a guitar. Picasso was 22 when some broken love affair, perhaps represented by that woman, caused him to re-envision the whole thing and to see himself as an old man with a guitar. It led the American poet Wallace Stevens to write his famous poem, The Man with the Blue Guitar, which begins, the man bent over his guitar, a shearsman of sorts, the day was green. They said, you have a blue guitar. You do not play things as they are. The man replied, things as they are changed upon the blue guitar. This could well be an epigraph for my memoir. I think the great blues guitarist Muddy Waters would have agreed. One of the things reviewing the past should teach us how important it is not to stay stuck on bitterness, nor succumb to despair. Muddy was raised in the Mississippi Delta by his grandma, having lost both his parents young in life. He followed the Great Migration north to Chicago, where my wife was born. And there he helped to change the mournful side of the blues into that upbeat benediction that has influenced most of the best popular music of the last 2 generations. Now the rising generation, however, just as we were at their age, tends to be how shall I put it, just a little judgmental. I also have a 16-year-old granddaughter. They tend to blame us, with some justification, for handing on to them a world that is still so full of problems. And perhaps they should really blame us, but for handing on the notion that everything can be fixed, or that it can be done quickly or easily. I remember when I was a young anti-war activist, my late friend, the Reverend William Sloane Coffin, would tell us repeatedly, if you find yourself being disillusioned, try asking yourself why you entertained so many illusions to begin with. Or as the British poet Philip Larkin put it in a verse that I have had to somewhat soften for the pulpit, they mess us up, our mums and dads. They may not mean to, but they do. They hand on all the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But they were messed up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like the coastal shelf. Get out as quickly as you can, and don't have any kids yourself. As the critic so aptly puts it, Larkin manages to paint modern despair so accurately as to show it to be utterly absurd, which is what good therapy does, in telling us to tell the story of our lives in a kinder, more self-compassionate way. Another poet, W.H. Auden, put it this way in his poem In Memory of Sigmund Freud: he wasn't clever at all. He just told the unhappy present to recite the past like a poetry lesson, till sooner or later it faltered at the line where long ago the accusations had begun, and suddenly knew by whom it had been judged, how rich life had been, and how silly, and was life forgiven and more humble, able to approach the future as a friend without a wardrobe of excuses, without a set mask of rectitude or an embarrassing overfamiliar gesture. So much of the polarized cultural politics of our time, have to do with very differing views of the past that we've shared. But if there's one thing I've learned from over 50 years of working with families reviewing the deaths of elders, it's that no two kids ever recall the past or their parent in quite the same way. Some get nostalgic. If only life could again be as I recall it, not as I experienced it. Make the past great again, even if it's a myth, to which others with more therapy and truthfulness then scream, "Are you kidding?" Our family, our nation has never been perfect, not from the beginning. In fact, it has been at its worst when it has thought itself pure. As an historian, I never cover up the truth about the past, about America being built upon colonial expropriation of indigenous land, or the genocidal assumptions of white supremacy, or the wealth extracted both from the earth and from the exploited. Yet in hearkening to the call to heal the aftermath of abuse, I also know how simplistic attempts at reconciliation, I think of Israel and Hamas today, they easily become a kind of dialogue of the deaf, with neither side hearing the hopes or the fears of the other. And it is no different here in our own land. Some of us have degrees and therapists and poetry and an inner life and others, in their constant anxiety, little access to any. And yet we, the haves, all too often dare to look down on the have-nots and even blame them for the brokenness. Pause over that thought for just a moment. If I point a finger at someone else, 3 fingers point back at me. But also, let us not pretend that any of us are all-powerful. As I write history and recall my own, my palms open. They open in gratitude for all that I've been given, in genuine joy for the gift of life, even for the hard times, the anxious times. What strikes me most is how quickly all of us in this age have to adapt, perhaps faster than at any time in evolutionary or human history. The pace of our own technology running ahead of us, connecting us, yet also separating and dividing us. As I write my memoir, I am conscious of my own artful Pentimenti. There's no need for me to go over the differences I had, the anger I felt with so-and-so long ago, how I was hurt by some old betrayal, nor to pretend that I was always right, because I was not. What is important is to review the past while painting an honest picture of paths that did lead to a more just, more hope-filled, and inclusive future that Dr. King so aptly called beloved community. I'll write with pride about the 10 years I spent as national co-chair of Freedom to Marry, helping our gay, lesbian, bisexual brothers and sisters experience family life, legally recognized, with rights of adoption and child rearing. We learn from experience in this life and from mistakes. The approach to divine living, said the ancient teachers of wisdom, is not this, not that, yet without giving up on the endless work of honest repair. So as we make our prayerful resolutions for the year ahead, may they begin with self-care, with growing a larger soul within ourselves, even at the broken places, becoming more compassionate, more patient, more generous, even to ourselves, and therefore more supported by and connected to those who in their lives are closest to us. And may the hope of authentic community, embodied in no small part in a fellowship like this, however imperfectly, for we are all imperfect. May that example and hope of beloved community sustain us in wishing it for more people, more often, everywhere. We cannot do everything, but let us do what we can, here and now, in the time that is ours. Amen.